This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Sports Files is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
My guest today on Sports Files is former Major League Baseball All-Star outfielder Darryl Strawberry. He may not have produced Hall of Fame credentials like Babe Ruth, Mickey Mantle, or Willie Mays, but for most Major League Baseball fans, the name Strawberry is just as recognizable. In fact, most sports fans can tell you they have definitely heard of one, Darryl Eugene Strawberry. At 50 years old, Strawberry has already lived an iconic life filled with extreme highs and the lowest of lows. He was an 8-time All-Star, the 1983 National League Rookie of the Year, and a 4-time World Series champion, first with the Mets and then again 3 times over with the Yankees. He was a 5-tool star and the toast of the Big Apple. But like in the case with a number of larger-than-life figures, his world started crumbling around him, and most of it occurred away from the ballpark. Drugs, jail time, 2 divorces, and a battle with colon cancer that nearly cost him his life. Nowadays, Strawberry is on his 3rd marriage. He's found God and seems to be the most content he's ever been in his life. Look back at the trials and tribulations of Darryl Strawberry, next on Sports Files. Darryl was saying 50 years, you're 50 years old, I'm 50 years old. I've lived a pretty good life so far. You have lived a life, I think, that would be the amount of 10 men or 10 people, because you've done a little bit of everything, the goods, the bads, the highs, and the lows. Right now, where are you in your life?
Well, you're right about that. You know, good, the bad, the highs and lows. You know, you find out that life is really like a journey, you know, that you go on, and, you know, what's your real purpose. And you know, a lot of times people think it is when you play sports, you know, that's, you know, your purpose in life. And, you know, I was a pretty decent baseball player, and I had fun playing baseball and winning. And then I had a lot of lows, you know, in life. And then I was able to, you know, really, you know, find my purpose over the last 9 years, you know, of my life. You know, I'm in full-time ministry. You know, I preach the gospel. I travel around, you know, all over, and different churches, and just share the gospel, you know, the word of God. You know, the call of God was on my life, you know, and I really stepped into the greatest purpose. I'm having the greatest time, you know, that I've ever had. Even playing baseball was just a part of what I really enjoy, but I really enjoy, you know, who I am, the man I am today.
You met your wife in 2003, I believe it was. She's from St. Louis in the Missouri area. You live there now. As you mentioned before we started taping, you go around the country to preach. Where's the connection? When did it come where you thought, the ministry, that's what I want to do. I want to talk to people about the wrongs of my life, the ills of my life, and I want to make sure that I'm helping people stay on the straight and narrow.
Well, it wasn't, you know, when it came to. It came into play, you know, because the call was on my life. And, you know, I think it's just about really answering the call and being, you know, prepared, you know, and, you know, being changed and doing, you know, doing things the right way. But, you know, all of it really took place more for me when I really started studying the Bible. You know, everything really came to life. You know, information is revelation, you know, and you know, you start getting the right information, you get the real revelation of why you're here. You know, and I think a lot of us miss that because we don't have the right information. A lot of times we, you know, we get the world stereotypes of who we are, you know, as athletes and stuff. And, you know, like I said, that's just part of, you know, what we do. But, you know, I got the right information, you know, and about true revelation, and about true clarity to me. And I was able to, you know, put it into practice in the way I live my life, and the person I am today, and the things that I've done over the last 9 years of my life.
You said a moment ago you were a pretty good baseball player. Well, let's put it this way. You're very modest. One of the most feared hitters that ever played the game. Started out with the New York Mets and won a World Series title in '86. Take us back to that time. Did you think life was going to be that easy? World Series title, go out there, all-star teams, living the high life. I'm sure.
Well, I think we all think it's going to be that simple. Being young, naive, making decisions and bad choices. Because there are consequences behind your actions as an individual, right. And when you learn that and take responsibility for that, you're able to look at yourself and say, there's more to life. When you're not able to do that, you can't figure out that there's more to life because you want to criticize and blame everybody else for your mistakes. And like the Bible said, we've all fall short, of the glory. And when you understand falling short doesn't mean it's not over. And you pick yourself up and you move into your real purpose. And that's what it's been for me. It's been a real purpose living. I've been driven by helping others and encouraging others and preaching the gospel, and just, explaining that, no matter how far you've gone down the scale, look at me, you hear this guy that's been pretty far down the scale, and, with drug addiction, which I don't hide from people,
right.
Facing cancer twice, and losing my left kidney in my second surgery. So there was a great meaning for my life, and it wasn't just about putting a uniform on and achieving things on the baseball field.
I want to read this quote. In 2000, you said you lost the will to live. You stopped chemo there for a bit. I can't imagine it can get any lower than that point.
Well, it probably could, but
yes.
You think about it. But you look and see, what the Lord has done, through my obedience, through my changing, and look at today from where I was from 2000 to 2012 now, and look at the picture that's being painted. Like I said, I keep saying it, for people and the viewers, that hear this, if you get the right information, there's revelation in your life, and a lot of times we don't get that, and we miss out. We think we have come up short, and it's not the end. As long as you have breath, you have a chance to do something great, because we're always created for a purpose, and we just have to find it.
Let's talk about baseball. Let's talk about your amazing career, 4 World Series championships, 3 with the Yankees, 1 with the Mets. Let's go back to '86 and a team that had Doc Gooden, the late Gary Carter, who we lost way too early,
yes.
Keith Hernandez. Darryl was, and I'm not sure when it started for you with with drug abuse, the narcotics. Was that happening during that time in '86 when you guys won the World Series championship? Was that something that was very prevalent?
Well, I just think in sports periods, drugs has always been around. Some type of drugs, narcotics, amphetamines, alcohol. Alcohol's a drug too. Most people drink themselves to death.
Right, exactly.
And people don't realize that, and they think, well, that how could you? It's a sickness that people get involved in, and sports have always been, tied up with, some kind of drugs, and they've done a good job of cleaning the game up, over the past years, but it's been a long history behind that, through players that have come along and that have found that lifestyle as a fast pace, especially for young players like myself and Gooden. We didn't play in Seattle. We played in New York.
The limelight.
Yeah, you're in the limelight, and the action, and everybody wants to be your friend. So
right.
You're young, you're naive, you think everybody's your friend, and you go through you go through what you have to go through.
Do you feel like you're indestructible?
I think sometimes you do. I never felt that way. I just felt compelled to be a part of what I wanted to be a part of. And that was at the time. That was about enjoying life. And when you believe that, that's what it all boils down to. I think we were no different than kids that went to college and get crazy and do crazy things. We just happened to be
on a larger scale.
On a larger scale in the professional. Playing pro ball and being at the major league level and playing in a city like New York City.
All right. The ball goes through Buckner's legs. Your thoughts? What were you thinking? What were you doing right there at that moment?
I was in the clubhouse, I think it was a double switch for me, and I was in the clubhouse and I didn't move, and Hernandez was in the clubhouse. And it was a treat, unfortunately not for Bill Buckner,
No.
Which was a great player, which most people don't.
Absolutely great player.
Everybody doesn't recognize him as an outstanding ball player he was. And, that one particular play, it kind of held that against him for such a very long time, which, you think is really unfair because of, all the great things he accomplished as a player.
You get to the end of the career, and you think maybe it's over, and people maybe think it's over, and then you're rejuvenated with New York, and 3 more titles with the Pinstripers. The Mets fans probably called you a traitor, right? I would imagine.
Yeah, there was not a lot of happy people, around that time.
What was it like, Darryl, to find that new lease on life and to win 3 more titles with the Yankees?
Well, it was remarkable, because the boss George, brought me back to New York, which there was someone that loved me from God knows when, he said, and he kind of wished he would have been around, at the time I came a free agent, to be able to allow me to come and play in New York. So it was a remarkable time to come back to New York and wear the pinstripes and be in the Bronx and just to be able to play with the kind of teams we had and play for my manager, Joe Torre. It was, Joe was more like Davey Johnson.
Right.
As a manager, he's someone who's played the game, understand the game, so he just let players be players.
With all the great accomplishments on the field, what was your greatest?
I think winning. Winning is greater than anything. I think we all play this game, and when it's all over and said and done, did you win? No matter how great a stats you have, I think when players play for stats, they don't play for the true purpose of what this game is all about, because the game is not about one individual, it's about a team. And when you play on some of the greatest teams and you get a chance to win, they will always be remembered.
How does it feel to know that your name is so iconic? You can think of maybe 20, 25 names, Ruth and Mantle and DiMaggio. Strawberry is an iconic name that will always be around. People will know that name, the Darryl chants. How does it feel to be that guy?
Well, it feels great. It feels great more than just being a baseball player, but being the person that I am today and really being able to have a effect on people
right.
more than anything, and in a correction way, because I had to be corrected by God. And just to show that, God loves us no matter what, and I think that's more important to me than, all the things I've accomplished as a baseball player, hitting home runs, Grand Slams, World Series, just to show people that, they're not forgotten about, because if I can go that far down the scale, they also can be redeemed into life too. And that's what's important. That's really the real purpose, I think, when I look back over my life and what really means the most. Am I making a difference, to help somebody else?
It's easier for them to listen to what you're saying because you've been down that road.
Yes. It's a road I've been down. It's a road of trials and tribulations. It's a road of, frustrations, aggravations, hopeless, and not giving up and not quitting. And I think a lot of times people end up quitting before the miracle. There's a miracle at the end of everybody's life. I believe that. Why would I be sitting here? There's no reason for me to be sitting here unless it was a miracle for me.
Right.
So that's the same for anyone else.
Darryl, with performance-enhancing drugs, that came into baseball, at least what we know, the outside looking in, kind of at the end of your career and then afterwards. I assume it wasn't around when you started and you were hitting home runs naturally, a huge guy with a lot of power. What has it done to baseball, in your opinion?
I don't really think it, did a lot for baseball. I think it had more of an effect on younger players, and younger kids, more than anything. The guys at the major league level, those guys are very professional, and they knew what they were getting into and everything. But you think about the generation that comes under them, it has to be an example for them not to do. And they were looking at the great stars who were doing it. So that was the most important thing. Who was going to have an effect on? Who was going to have the tremendous effect on? And it had a tremendous effect on young people in high school. Young kids thinking they have to compete because they have to use steroids to compete, to be stronger, to be faster. And that's not true, because you're athlete, and your skills are just going to automatically shine when you go out there and play.
Darryl, who was the greatest pitcher you ever faced?
Greatest pitcher I ever faced was Nolan Ryan. I have nothing but a lot of admiration and respect for Nolan Ryan. He was one of the toughest pitchers I ever had to face in my career.
The greatest player you ever had to play against, and the greatest player you ever played with?
The greatest player I ever had to play against was Barry Bonds. He was the single most greatest player that I've ever seen. Play the game the way he played the game. And the greatest player I ever had the chance to play with, and he's still playing, and he just broke his ankle, was Derek Jeter. I've had the privilege of playing with him, and just a remarkable person, class act for baseball, and just, what he's accomplished, in his career. It's unfortunate that he had to break his ankle last night, but he's been there so many times. He's done so many great things. So he is by the most, outstanding player that I've ever had a chance to be around and play with.
Darryl, you were on Celebrity Apprentice, Donald Trump show. What was that like?
It was fun. Donald Trump is, a dear friend, and, he invited me to come on the show. I really didn't want to go on the show, but he insisted. He insisted I come on the show, so I had the opportunity to be a part of that, and it was different.
Is it neat when The Simpsons, they got Darryl Strawberry on there. It just, like I said before, with the iconic figure you are, do you get a kick out of it? Obviously, you've had children. Do they get a kick out of it? Your wife saying, wow, look, there's Dad.
Well, I think so. After, the years have passed and you look at it and they goes, you were on The Simpsons, Dad? You're on Celebrity Apprentice. The kids think about those kind of things, and they get a kick out of it. I just think it's part of, what comes along with playing in New York City.
Right.
It's a part of the taste of New York City.
Darryl, a couple other things before we wrap it up. What is the biggest regret you've ever had?
I don't really think it's none. I mean, we could sit here and, people can analyze themselves and judge themselves and say, would I done that? Would I done that? Well, you don't know. You're young. You're just about do anything. And I don't regret, the things I've done. They happened. I learned a lesson from them, and I was able to move forward now. And I'm able to use that in such a positive way, in such an effect to tell people, about themselves, that are hurting, that are struggling. Look at me. I didn't give up. I didn't quit. The main thing is to try to get people to understand, don't ever quit. Don't ever quit, because you never know what the end may be for you.
I was going to ask you, what's your message? Would that be the message you give?
That's the message. The message is don't quit, because you don't know the end of your journey. It's not how you start, it's how you finish this race of what we call life. There's a lot of people start off good, but they don't finish good. And there's a lot of people start off bad, but they finish good. So,
you had a long, detailed chapter in your life, chapter 1. Now getting ready for this long, detailed chapter number 2. It's going to be a fun road, I'm sure. Darryl, we always leave our guests with 5 for the road. So 5 quick questions, whatever comes to your mind. The first question I always ask folks is your favorite sports team, professional. You can't use any of your former baseball teams. So your favorite professional sports team that you root for?
Lakers.
The Lakers. Favorite athlete of all time?
Jordan.
Okay. Go basketball. Favorite musician or artist, musical act, group?
Michael Jackson.
Okay. TV show, all time?
The One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest.
For the movie.
Yeah.
So you like Jack Nicholson, the movie?
Yeah.
Is there a television series that you watch?
Well, television series. Television series, I like Law and Order.
Sure, good choice. Do you keep up with baseball today? Do you watch a lot of the games, or do you just not have the time with the preaching?
I don't really have a lot of time. I mean, I'm pretty much tied up in ministry more than anything. I get a chance to see some here and there.
And for those who don't know, DJ was a Maryland Terrapin basketball player, and a heck of one. So certainly I got something in here for DJ and for the Strawberries. Thank you for that, being a fellow Maryland Terrapin.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed him going to Maryland and watching him play there.
Darryl, thanks again.
All
Really
right.
appreciate it. It was an absolute pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for killing my Phillies all those years.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Love the vet. Love hitting in the vet.
Well, the baseball season has come to an end. Another one is just around the corner. And one of the names who has been synonymous throughout the years in helping provide baseball outlets for the youth of the Mid-South is Tim Doolin. The former pro player has helped run the Game Day Foundation for years, giving many youngsters an opportunity to get involved with America's pastime. Now Doolin has joined forces with a new Memphis nonprofit organization called Memphis Sluggers, whose goal is to not only give area youth a chance to play baseball, but in turn, through the game, become better educated in all walks of life. In a few weeks, former Major Leaguer and Memphis Sluggers co-founder Reggie Williams will join us here on Sports Files to talk about his involvement. But right now, Tim Doolin and a conversation we had earlier. Tim, tell me a little bit about Memphis Sluggers, the foundation.
Well, Reggie Williams, who everybody knows is the former big leaguer with the Dodgers, voice of the Redbirds with Steve Selby at one time, and also did a lot of work with Charlie, while he was working for the Redbirds.
Right, Charlie Lee.
We've actually joined forces with what we've been doing over the last 15 years. And the Memphis Sluggers is basically an organization that's going to help not only revitalize the inner city baseball and getting kids interested in the game of baseball, but it's also going to have an academic twist to it as well, where we're going to use some of our players that are in our Doolin Dodger program to help mentor some of these kids and basically just hopefully grow the sport of baseball in the city of Memphis through the inner city.
How did this idea come about?
To be honest with you, Greg, ironically, we've been doing it a little bit over the last several years. But Reggie and Sean came by one day. They were looking for a facility to host an inner city clinic with their new organization that they formed. And we got to talking, and we met 2 or 3 different times. And Sonny Jackson, who's very involved with what we do, we just felt it on our hearts that this was a perfect marriage for us to join forces with these guys. So it's happened over the last month and a half.
You brought in Darryl Strawberry for this Charlie Lee Memorial Dinner. First of all, talk about bringing in such a name, iconic name in baseball. And second of all, a little bit about losing the great Charlie Lee, that we're also saddened of how early he passed.
Well, I'm very good friends with a guy named Rob Drummerhauser. I played with him with the Orioles. He worked for the Mets and for the Orioles, and now doing some work with the Yankees. He and I are very good friends. He's best friends with Darryl. I kind of explained to him what we were thinking and what we were doing. And he said, Straw would be perfect for it. He knew Charlie, faced him several times, obviously, knew what a great guy Charlie was. We explained to him what our mission and goals were, and with Darryl's new ministry that he's formed and his really call, I think, in life after baseball, it was a perfect fit for us. We called him. He said, "I'm in. Let me know when it is," and it's worked out great.
And with Charlie, obviously losing an iconic figure here in the Memphis area, a fantastic pitcher in his own right, certainly sad, but we certainly try to uplift a lot of people here. You do certainly with this dinner and with the golf tournament that coincides with it, because of just how great he was when he was here with us.
I don't think, if the people that knew Charlie know this, but a lot of people, the most humble guy you'd ever meet.
Right.
Never was about him. As many things as he accomplished in baseball, he always would shield anybody that was trying to talk about his career. I've known him for a long time. He was one of my best friends, truly missed. But the things he taught me, and I think the things he taught kids that were involved in what baseball was about, will live on forever. And I think it's only fitting that we continue to do what he was about, which was helping kids. The game of baseball, once it gets in your blood, it's in there.
Right.
And it's, we see it every day in our industry. And guys like Charlie, you can't replace them. You can only try to help, his legacy live on. And I think he would be smiling today.
Tim, thanks for all you do with youth baseball here in Memphis. We
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Last Saturday, the South Carolina Gamecocks edged the Tennessee Vols 38-35, dropping UT to 0-5 in conference play. And 2 significant stories overshadowed the actual game. One may have been directly affected by the outcome, or at least the rumors say it was. There are many who feel that the UT loss puts the nail in Coach Derek Dooley's coffin. Dooley is yet to beat a top 25 team as head coach, and once again came up short. Athletic Director Dave Hart will have the ultimate say about Dooley's future, but in any case, the coach won't be hurting when he gets his financial parting gift. The same can't be said for South Carolina tailback Marcus Lattimore, who suffered a devastating right knee injury, and who just a season earlier suffered another season-ending injury, only that one was to his left knee. The word is he may not be able to play again until 2014. Now, Lattimore vows to return, but nothing is certain at this point. And as soon as the injury occurred, the questions started to surface like they tend to do. Why don't college players get paid? Why can't players right out of high school be eligible for the draft? or at least not required to be 3 years removed from high school? Legitimate questions. Now, would I like to see college athletes paid? I would like to see them get a stipend, but not full-fledged paychecks. Would I like to see the same rule as they have for basketball, and that's to make players available for the draft after only 1 year of college? Yes, I would. You have the right to work, but likely an NFL team won't feel you're ready. Lattimore's injury was sickening, but injuries occur anywhere at any time. Sometimes life just isn't fair. And that'll do it for this week's show. If you have a future idea for a topic, drop us a line at our website, WKNO.org. And to see a replay of any of our previous shows, head to the website and click on KNO Tonight. And I'll talk to you next time.